I have never played Wordle, but
You
apparently
haven't.
this is a phenomenon and I know nothing about it. I need you to enlighten me.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess you know that you can probably see that I have done Wordle before. I stopped it a few weeks ago, but it's interesting. It's kind of like a little word guessing game, and there's several different versions of it, but I think it's 5 letters, and you plug in these letters, and if it's the correct letter in the right space, then it'll have a green background. If it's the correct letter in the wrong space, it'll have a yellow background. And so you kind of just keep working. I think you get 5 or 6 tries to get it. And it's maddening. It's just maddening, actually, because I forgot the other day, there was one that I had in just one letter off. You don't realize how many, like stove, stone, it's just, some of it's just luck, throwing in the right consonant there. So, but it is fun.
Okay. I need to try it. Everybody's playing it but me.
You realize you know more words than you think you do, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Wordle.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, maybe it's a good vocabulary exercise too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And you'll maybe even just in the random checking, you're like, that's a word. And then it'll make you go look up that word. So, yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, welcome, Blake.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm in Paris today.
Nice. I chose this specifically. I'm silently correcting your grammar.
Yes.
I thought it was appropriate. Yeah, for this particular episode.
I am so excited to have you because people get to meet my other writing half because I could not exist without you. And your name is Blake Leyers, rhymes with cake layers, which is
That's right.
Twitter. I love that. Every time I'm on Twitter, I get hungry. I'm like, cake layers, yes.
Right. Well, it's funny. If you live in the South and you see the spelling, if you put an M there instead of an L, then you're going to say Myers.
Right.
And so a lot of times, most times, people will say Liars. And, this is my husband's last name, and he doesn't really care a whole lot. But I, on the other hand, have taken great exception to being called a liar.
Layers sounds much better.
It's funny. A friend had said, I guess there was some dialogue on Twitter about pronunciation, and she said Blake Leyers, like cake layers, and I'm like, I'm putting that in my Twitter handle now. So
yes, no,
I'm not going to be terribly upset. I will stay silent, maybe if it's mispronounced, but
Yes. Well, you are my editor. You're my developmental editor, but we'll get into all of that in a minute. And I'm going to call you a professional author wrangler because there's there's a lot of
I like that.
So tell me how you got involved in editing. How did you become an editor?
Wow. So it's really interesting, actually, I guess in a very unorthodox way. I had always loved English as in school, in elementary school, middle school, high school. Somehow that didn't translate over to college, though, as far as, choosing majors. I have always loved stories. Since I was little, I had a bookshelf in my room. I still have books from that bookshelf long, long ago. And so my love of books has been lifelong. But I guess decades after college and everything, a friend had asked me to beta read a novel he was working on. And all of a sudden, it's like some muscle memory started. And I mean, I'd been reading, of course, but having to look at it with a critical eye, being asked to look at it with a critical eye, all of a sudden it just kind of rekindled my love of just kind of getting in there into story. And so I started, I think you mentioned Twitter a second ago. We both mentioned, I got out on Twitter and kind of liked several authors and other editors, and kind of got involved in this community where I had an opportunity to beta read for other people. And slowly this idea started. I think I like editing. I was very fortunate that an author, a local author we both know, I had befriended her. I guess I can say names, right?
That's up to you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. JT Ellison. She is a very generous writer, generous friend to the writing community in Nashville and beyond.
I love her.
But she had asked me one day if I wanted to be a writer. And I said, actually, I think I want to be an editor. And she said, well, so just for fun, would you like to read my work in progress? And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I was very humbled by that. And so I did. She said, no pressure, just do what you do. And then we'll talk. And so I did. And she said, you're a developmental editor. And I was like, what is a developmental editor? But from there, I talked with other friends who were editors and took some courses to see if I knew what I thought I knew. And through the advice of Benjamin Dreyer, who was a Twitter friend and who was also at Penguin Random House or Penguin. And I could go on and on about him, but he just said, just go, just start. And so I did. And 8 years later, here we are.
Tell me what a developmental editor is, because a lot of people probably don't know the differences between, so a developmental editor, copy editor, line editor, proofreader. A lot of people don't think about all of those things.
Right. And yes, so a developmental editor is primarily the editor you want for the first stage of writing. I mean, you have your manuscript, you have your first draft, and then when you come to a developmental editor, they're going to be able to look at your work at the big picture items and speak to the structure, to plot, to character, kind of these, broad, things about getting your story in place. Now, and then there's line editing and copy editing and proofreading, as you said. Sometimes the lines blur a little bit for me, but it's really, as I've said to you in the past, I will, look at these elements, but also if I see other little catches, I'll make note of them. But then the phase after that is line editing. And so once you have your story kind of shaped, then and you're not going to make any major changes in plot or characterization or anything like that, then line editing is when you kind of come in and revise for style and for flow, sentence flow, phrasing, word choice, showing versus telling. Yeah. That's and although clearly, I mean, as a developmental editor, I home in on that as well. But especially from pardon?
You need to.
Yeah. I mean, because that is very much a part of developing your story, how you look at your story. I think when you think of those sensory details, touch, feel, taste, what is the weather like? Those things, I can only imagine as a storyteller, when you're also thinking about that can enhance your experience as you're writing. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think it's difficult. And one reason that we need editors like you is because sometimes in a scene, you can get caught up in one very specific thing, maybe something that is happening between two characters, and you forget about the atmosphere around them, or you're not so focused on that to make it that full, well-rounded body of a scene, and you kind of have to go back and layer it in. But there's those moments where you forget, oh, I didn't say anything about the fact that it's still raining outside, or, things like that. So
yeah, exactly. And those are things that I look for. And another thing, I know I'm not going to say anything that you don't already know or have heard me say, but I feel like my job is to make sure that everything that is in your head has translated to the page. So, because when you're telling the story, you as the storyteller, you know what's going on, but sometimes that might not make it to the page, and there might be a critical little element that you can convey in just a sentence, that makes all the difference in how your reader knows your character or what's going on. But as far as the other types of editing, you have copy editors and proofreaders. And so copy editors are going to look at, from the perspective of grammar and punctuation and word choice, little things like if in one scene the main character's eye color is blue, later on if it's brown, those little technical things, not that I don't look for that too, but that's where a copy editor is really, really going to pay close attention to that. And then at the end, your quality control check, I guess is what I would call them. The quality control check is your proofreader, and they check formatting, spelling, punctuation. They're the comma catchers, if you will. So,
yikes.
And well, and I mean, and it's funny how you can sit there, and I'm sure you do this as a writer too. No, let's take that comma out. Let's put that comma back in.
I agonize over commas probably more than anything else, even when posting on social media. I will go through every single word, say it out loud, hear it in my head, make sure.
Yes, no, I do too. Actually, I mean, this conversation is actually just going to be all about Twitter today. But Twitter it actually challenged me to be more succinct in what I was trying to say, or in the earlier days before you can, as Twitter has evolved now, you can write more and more and more. But was it 14? Whatever the character, I forgot there was a limited number. Say what you want to say in this very succinct way. And so it really was kind of helpful to me, and challenged me to really be concise.
There needs to be that balance between saying what you need to say in as few words as possible, but still giving that atmosphere.
Yes.
But that in setting up that environment that really gives the reader not only a visual, but an immersion into the story where they feel like they're there with the characters. And if you're too short with it, if you're too concise, you might lose some of that.
Very much. Yes, very much. And that is where those sensory details come into play too, because it gives the reader, it's the difference between feeling like you're watching from the outside versus sitting right beside them and going through what they're going through as well.
It's a very intimate moment, your POV, with what's happening with that character. So as a reader, we might feel further away from that character.
Right.
If it's not written the way that you're talking about. So
yeah, the difference between, so for instance, talking about someone being nervous, telling the reader that the person is nervous versus showing that they're nervous, witnessing a little trickle of sweat, or the teacup that clatters in the saucer, as that's sensory. And everybody can relate to that. And just that little bit really tells a lot. I think another way that I've described it is showing that someone has left the room in frustration, and instead of telling that, they slamming the door, they exit and slam the door. that pretty much conveys frustration or anger,
How they're
without
walking.
telling.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can do it. That's maybe not even so overt. Paying attention to little things like maybe the way they're gripping something and the way their knuckles are, or the way they are pursing their lips, or just all the little things. When you hone in on those tiny details that we all experience as humans when we are experiencing different emotions, or that we exhibit when we're experiencing different emotions, all those little details. Because I might be extremely angry. I might get really mad at you, Blake, but I may not slam anything down.
Right.
I would never.
Right.
I may not throw my tea in your face, but I may have something in my eyes, in my posture, that conveys
little clench of the jaw. Yeah. Little furrow of the brow, or right. Just something really subtle. But readers relate to that. And we all relate to that. And I mean, I can only imagine what I may look like sometimes when I'm reading, actually mirroring what's happening on the page.
Yes. That's why reading in public, it's like, okay, listen, did anybody just see that? It's like, that your facial expressions just changed. But yeah, it's very powerful when you can do that. When you can give those descriptions in such a way that we feel it internally when we're reading. Tell me about when you go from editing someone's work, you're in editor mode and you've got editor hat on, to I'm going to kick back, relax, and I'm going to read the latest insert favorite author's book that just came out. How does that change for you? Is that difficult? How do you balance that?
That's a great question. Not long after I started editing, I had back-to-back projects and had not had time for pleasure reading, although my work is pleasure reading as well for me. I remember picking up a book that I'd been waiting to read. It was one in a series. It was the latest in a series. And I could not get off the first page without switching into editor mode, analyzing. I mean, there was nothing that I felt needed to be correct, but I was paying attention to sentence structure and punctuation. And I put it down and immediately called a dear friend who was reading the same series. And I said, I'm so upset. I can't read this book. I can't switch out of editor mode. And she said, try the audio version. And this was before audiobooks were like really popular. I think Audible existed at the time. I guess it had to have existed, but so I'm not sure that the Libby app, or actually those things weren't as available. The library, access to the library, you actually had to go and rent the tape or whatever it was. But that helped me tremendously. So I actually now, when I read a book for pleasure, I do it through audio. Sometimes I still will catch, there'll be something that might take me out, but it's very rare. And then but I love an actual book. I mean, you can see behind me. So my favorites, I purchase the actual book. Even if I listen to it, I still want it in my library. There will be a time where I will sit down and actually read and flip pages. But yeah, audiobooks have kind of saved me for my pleasure reading. Also, I can do it in the car. I can get housework done and, go for a walk, not a run so much anymore, but a walk, and have my stories with me.
Well, let's talk about the relationship between an author and an editor, and how important that is. And I can just speak from my side of things that it's invaluable. I could not put, I couldn't put a set value on that, because what I do on my end, then when I send it to you, you're able to bring out things that I hadn't thought about, or you're able to see where maybe, like we talked about, I can see it in my head, but I did not convey this very well on the page to the reader. Lots of different things, but it's just you have a way of sort of switching gears in my brain so that I can look at the story with fresh eyes, with another set of eyes, a different perspective, because I get, as a writer, we get very focused on maybe a one track sort of at times. So what is it like on your side, with the relationships that you have with your authors?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I look at it is when a writer hands a story over to me, it's like handing a baby, they're handing me their baby, their book baby. And I think that maybe there are some out there who it's not a very vulnerable thing, but I think every person I've worked with so far, I recognize that is a vulnerable act, because you have put blood, sweat, tears, countless hours into this. And so to be trusted, especially because as a developmental editor, I am for many the very first reader, unless you have a critique partner, or, but for many of my clients, I am the very first person who has read their work. And so I take that very seriously. And I try to, I think being kind and aware and diplomatic and tactful, those are all really important things, because I need to build trust. I want to build trust with my clients, my writers, and putting myself in their shoes that, well, how would I want to receive this information, and when I'm going through a manuscript, it's really important to me to mark and note the things that I love as well. I mean, I have one client a return client who will say, I love that you point those things out. Right now, I just want you to hit it hard, and I just want to know what I need to fix. And I appreciate that. I appreciate knowing that that's what they want. It kind of helps them cut to the chase, but I still can't resist putting in when something really evokes any kind of emotion in me. I cannot help but at least acknowledge that. That follow-up is where the magic really happens. I love that part of the process, because then you get to ask me questions. It allows me to clarify thoughts that I have. You can shine a light on some things that maybe I was confused about. And then if there needs to be, any brainstorming, I love the riff, the exchange, the magic that happens in that part of the process.
Well, what are some of your favorite books and authors?
Oh my gosh, I'm in a hot seat now, let me tell you. I have so many writers that I enjoy. I'm a historical fiction fan, mystery, contemporary. I'm a sucker for a good series. I love Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache series, and Deanna Rayburn's Veronica Speedwell, her Lady Julia books as well, Lady Julia Gray, but Veronica Speedwell is her current series. Sherry Thomas's Lady Sherlock. Have you read that series?
I have not.
It is so clever. And I think that's one of the things, particularly about the Deanna and Sherry in the Victorian era, and just they both have humor kind of laced in there with mystery, a little bit of romance. I love being kind of taken through the whole wheel of emotions, in a book. Yeah. And those hit it. I mean, Beatrice Williams, pretty much anything Beatrice, definitely anything Beatrice writes. I love her stories. Victoria Schwab, have you read the Invisible Life of Addie LaRue?
No, but it was on my list. And I think we talked about when it came out, I did not read it because I did not want it to influence anything I was writing at the time. And I knew, I had heard after it was
Oh,
already.
yeah, we might have talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the book that I wrote last year, I was mostly through that one, I think, or at least halfway, something along those lines. And I got an inkling of the premise for that book because everybody was talking about it. And I was like, nope, can't read that one.
Yes.
Have not read it yet. I've
I
been
remember
reading a lot
that
of
now, like yeah, I remember that now. We did talk about that. Yeah. Yeah, she, her world building and just the creativity that went into telling and crafting that story is just amazing. And who's not up for a good Faustian bargain?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Let's do a segment where we get like a Q&A or like a do's and don'ts kind of advice from the editor. Okay.
Oh gosh.
For anyone that sees this, that is looking for some tips, looking for some advice, let's start with things to avoid, things that you see too much of.
Oh gosh. And this might be different for me from coming from the developmental side, because I can think from the copy editing side, redundancy, using the same words or the same descriptive words, or, those, I don't know if they stand out to other readers, but for me, you can tell if there's a specific word that just kind of is repeated throughout. For me personally, that'll take me out of the story. If there's a specific word that's used, really often. That's probably my biggest thing, is just words that just relying on one good descriptive word. And that is something that should come through, in the process.
Yeah. And that's something that is so helpful to work with an editor, because I remember on the last book, and I don't remember what word it was or how many times, but you made a note, you have used this word X amount of times in this manuscript. And I was like, had no idea.
Right.
And so it was like this eye-opening thing, and it made me pay more attention.
Well, and that very much speaks to phases, like drafts, like phases of drafts. So like if that is something that I can point out in the developmental phase, then, and because that is in that phase, that is a minor thing, you're just looking to get the story on the page, and those word changes and stylistic things will happen later. But I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like, even though maybe that's, I'm still looking at the high level things, if I notice those little things, my hope is that by pointing that out in that early stage, that could inform you as a writer of, when we get to this next round, or when you get, further on. But I certainly don't want those kind of things to detract you from your process of kind of fleshing out the story.
Right. No, but it's good. It just makes us more aware.
I will err on the side of being too nitpicky. I'd rather err on the side of that, and point those things out, because that's the other thing about editing is it is subjective. And as the writer, it is your prerogative to accept or decline any, especially as a freelancer, there are no hills that you and I are going to fight on. Mine is purely, these are my observations, but then from there you get to decide, how important that is to you.
Which is what makes it a great partnership. And editors are excellent sounding boards, I think, for authors to bounce those things kind of back and forth on, and that extra perspective. But yeah, it's a great partnership, because you're not forcing me to change anything. But I am relying on your eye and your expertise to see where my weaknesses are in each particular manuscript, where I can strengthen them. So it's great.
Someone once called me a story midwife, and what was it you said, a wrangler?
Yes, you're a professional author wrangler.
Author wrangler, story midwife, but
I
I mean,
love
but that really is, there's a lot of truth to that, really. It does feel like, you have a book baby and you're helping bring this book into the world.
And some need more help than others,
right, right.
Some births are longer than others.
Some are just, you're just there to catch it, or
and some, as Blake is thinking of me in the past here, some
no.
require like forceps and vacuums and all kinds of
It is interesting. That's what I love is that all writers, whether you have written dozens of books or just a few, you all kind of have that when you have a current, work in progress, you all kind of still feel that vulnerability and, this is crap or whatever, that just those, I'm not sure about this. And I know that's frustrating I guess I'm sharing this in hopes that it is a comfort in some way to know that there's still, it just to me shows that you care about what you do, and you want to put forth the best story that you can. And yeah, sometimes even the most seasoned author, needs to have the C-section cart brought in.
Yeah, not the C-section.
Whatever is appropriate.
No.
We're going to just have to schedule a C-section on this one. So
I love that. All right, we'll bring in the good drugs, load them up.
That's right. Get that epidural ready.
Okay, your best advice, if you had to give advice to an aspiring writer or author, or to anyone who's seasoned, to anyone, your best, Blake Leyers' best writing advice.
Well, so my best writing advice, my best advice, I think, is if you have a passion for storytelling, then don't let anyone dash your hopes. Work at your craft. If your writing needs development, then take a workshop. Read, and keep writing. I think that our job as editors is to really encourage and help guide and help foster that process, because the world needs stories. Be willing to take a critique, and just being willing to sit with that feedback, and really, I think that's one of the reasons why I really try to preface that this is your decision, and trying to be diplomatic and tactful, to help create that atmosphere where the writer is more willing to sit for a second, because it's hard to deliver news that, okay, you've worked on this for how many months, and wow, I'm sorry, I feel like there's a lot more work to do. I mean, finding the right language, because what you're doing is we're using language. I mean, that's what story is. It's conveying in language. So I try to be mindful of my language as well. And it's frustrating when I hear of or read on Twitter or wherever of someone who's being a bit harsh in the way they deliver feedback. What is that? You draw more flies with sugar than vinegar, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
It's about creating that environment that will help cultivate a great story.
Yeah. So. And yeah, I love, you said it best, just don't give up. Do
not give up. If that is your passion, go for it. Just keep at it. All
right. Well, you have a little side venture that I currently am obsessed with, and I need to place another order. But the problem is you keep adding things to the list of options, and I want them all. So you're going to get a big giant order from me here pretty soon. You make sourdough bread.
I do. I came in, I am not exactly a pandemic baker, sourdough baker, because I came in on the tail end of that. But yeah, it was a little over a year ago that my dad gave me some starter, and I was so excited because my husband and I had lived in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, in the late 90s. And I fell in love with sourdough bread. And when we moved back, I really missed that very specific, sourdough bread. And so I made it my mission to try to, get to that level. And I made it for myself and had shared it with some other folks. And then I had multiple people say, you could sell this. I'm like, no. And then there's a lady in my part of town who on the weekends, she and her husband it's called Village Soup Club. She found out through a mutual friend that I make sourdough and said, should we partner up? I said, well, why don't you taste it first? And then we'll talk. And then that's kind of when things blew up. So I've partnered with her, but yeah, you're right. My list of flavors is growing because I like to tinker with recipes. Yes. And I'll tell you the blueberry lemon that I just
yes, I saw that and I went, oh, what?
Yeah, because you had gotten some to make French toast with, right?
Yes, for Connor's 20th birthday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if y'all like blueberries, you might like this for French toast for sure.
And the chocolate almond.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think I did that around Valentine's Day. I love chocolate. And I thought, what can I do? But actually, I never really thought about sweet with sourdough until I started baking. And so I was a little skeptical, but it's chocolate coconut almond. It's reminiscent of a German chocolate cake, except the consistency of sourdough. It's not too sweet. And powdered sugar on top. It's interesting. If you want something that is like a dessert, but not too sweet. Again, until I started making sourdough, I don't know that I ever would have tried it because I just think of, savory flavors or traditional sourdough, but these others are not, they're not too bad. So,
they look,
if I do say so myself.
Well, you talk about sensory details. Let me tell you what, the pictures that you share, I can smell it through the screen. I'm like, oh, I've got to have that. So no, I keep meaning to place another order, and I've had a lot of people ask me about it. So hopefully you're getting more and more business, because it is, when I say it's the best I've ever had, it is the best sourdough bread I've ever had.
I am, so thank you. I am stunned and humbled by that. I know what I like, and that others like it too, just kind of amazes me. And I just have to trust. It's kind of like with my editing business too. I it's kind of intuitive, and I know what I like in a story, and that my feedback is helpful to others. It still amazes me. And so it is interesting. There's kind of a parallel between my editing life and my sourdough life. And right now I'm able to balance the two pretty well, but yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate your faith in me, both as an editor and a sourdough baker.
Well, I love bread, and you are a phenomenal editor that I could not write books without. So you just married like the two perfect things right there.
So next time we'll just have to meet in person and have our coffee. Yes. And have our words and throw some bread in there too.
Sourdough and words. I might change the title of this show. Sourdough and words. No,
new episode. Yeah, a bonus. Yeah, coffee, words, and sourdough.
Yes. Maybe that's what we'll call your episode on YouTube. I don't have a title for it yet. So yeah, we'll do that. Well, where can we find you specifically for sourdough? If people want to order sourdough from you, I know locally, because it's not something you're shipping yet. So if people live.
Yeah, this is still very much, it's a micro bakery. So I am baking on demand at the moment. And I live in South Nashville. So particularly, I am accessible to folks in the Brentwood area, Antioch area, South Nashville and Nolensville. But for anyone beyond that area, I'm sure we can work something out. So,
Out of state people, you're out of luck. So if
out of state, yeah, I'm really sorry. My daughter keeps asking me to try to ship some to Athens, Georgia. And I haven't done that yet, but gosh, we won't go on that tangent with shipping costs and stuff. But no, Bakes by Blake is, I have a Facebook page, Bakes by Blake. There is another Bakes by Blake out there. So if you do, if you search that, you will probably come up with that page first. But with the @ symbol, mine is Bakes by Blake TN for Tennessee. And so that's where you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Now, Instagram, it is Bakes by Blake, at Bakes by Blake. And then editor-wise, Twitter is a good spot for me, at Blake Leyers, rhymes with cake layers. and that's pretty, and then I have a website, which is blakelayers.com. Okay. So for my editing, I don't have a website for the bread yet. Maybe we'll get there.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with me and enlightening all of us about, the editing process and about stories.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. So hopefully you'll come on again sometime, but I've really enjoyed this and I appreciate you taking the time, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, and cheers.
Cheers.